Can you imagine being 90 years old? Well, today I'm checking in with a mentor and we're going to have a conversation about life and church and just his overall wisdom for today. It should be a good conversation, so come on with me. All right, Bill. Well, thank you so much for taking time to sit down for this interview. And I just so appreciative of you and the role you've played in my life, the role you've played in many people's lives who are watching. And so I've got a lot of questions that I'd like to ask, but I've limited it to just a few for this time. Maybe we'll do it again in the future. But the first question that I have is well, it's actually a statement. You're 90 years old. So the question is what does it look like? What does it feel like to be 90? And to put this into perspective for those who are watching, when you were born, FDR was the president. That's so you've been alive, you've seen a whole lot. And so what does it look like? What does it feel like to be 90 years old?
Yeah, well, it feels good. And for a long time, people would say, when they'd find out my age, said, "Oh, you don't look that old. You don't look that old." So I'm still looking for that.
Yeah, that's right.
To keep happening. But as I look back and I think of my birth family, all of them are gone now except for me. Now, of course, I still have people like you and my nephew.
Yeah.
And that makes life worthwhile for me. But there are a lot of things I look in the past and I see in the whole progression of culture, the changes that have taken place. And I remember when I was in grade school, lived out in the country in Tennessee, and every time that the local church there would have a meeting, they would have a day service, and all the kids from school would go and be part of that day service. And of course now you're not allowed to do anything like that. That's just been one of the changes that's kind of taken place.
Wow.
And I've noticed it too in the sense of patriotism to our country. That during the Second World War, I remember we had what they call maneuvers in our community.
Wow.
And I would see them in their Jeeps going up and down the road. They'd have those fake battles going on. But they had rations on so much gasoline, so much sugar, so much of all the different things like that. But people were, and then even in school, they would give you once a week, I think, to buy savings stamps. Well, these were supporting the government.
Wow.
And there's just, everybody was together. It didn't matter. In fact, I don't even remember as a child being two parties. I just remember the people.
Interesting.
But it was very patriotic, and a lot of things have happened as I think of my own life. I can think of a lot of things that I'm glad I had the opportunity to do. I can think of others that I wish I hadn't have done.
Yeah.
And I can think of others I wish I'd have done differently.
Yeah.
So you get older, you reflect on those things sometimes, but you also think of how blessed it's that God has been.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, you've seen a whole lot. In fact, one of the things I thought you were about to say, because we did this in another interview a few years ago, is talking about going to church in a horse and buggy, which is just so foreign to even imagine. But, I look at where you are in life, and I would love to have the same energy and enthusiasm for life that you have. And I mean, you've really remained young at heart, and you see others, and for various reasons, not everybody has that same energy. So I'm curious, how have you remained young at heart, and can others do that?
You don't know that you're doing that. I guess if you get, I remember at one group meeting where we were that the men gathered in one place and the women in another place, and then there was a younger lady who lived there. She's single. And the men were all sitting around griping about something. She passed by and stopped and said, "You all are a bunch of old grumpy men." and You don't want to be that.
Wow.
And so I would have intentionally would look at what's happening with generation after generation, and where are the interests going. And the first thought that always comes to mind is, I don't know how they'll ever make it. Wow. But then again, you look at it and you see, that's not bad. So watching and intentionally trying to keep up with generational changes, and sometimes concerned about let's anchor somewhere. Let's get some anchors in here.
Yeah.
But it's been good though, just to watch generations come along.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, one of the things that I love about just our relationship and even the whole idea of church is you've got multiple generations in there. Everybody's one big family, and the younger generations get to learn from the older generations. Yes. And maybe the older generations get to learn some new tricks as well from the younger generations. But I guess one big question that I have is what advice do you have? 90 years old, you've served in the church, for 60 years or more. What advice do you have for younger generations?
Well, I would really advise for younger generations to not necessarily tie yourself to what's going on right now. You've got a past to look to as well, but you also have 2 generations or 3 generations in front of you. So what can you learn from these generations that are ahead of you, and go into it with an attitude of not, can I imagine being like that, but with an attitude, I wonder how that works out. And then just really being close to young people and watching them, the generations change there.
Yeah.
I can remember one specific thing, that as things started changing in the way a worship service is conducted with the singing, it was, for a long time they would plead with people to, let's get some new hymns written. Well, then all of a sudden it just burst on the scene that we've got hundreds of new spiritual songs coming out, but they were the young people's beat.
Yeah.
And so as those started coming out, the first thing as the older generation, what in the world is happening? And I remember that one time I was at a meeting and one of the young men was up leading singing. And as he did, he kind of closed his eyes and like he was really meditating with God. My first thought was, how can he lead singing with his eyes shut?
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, I've worked all my life to get young people involved like this.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see this guy up there.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, for the young people, learn from the older. And then I'd like to throw this in for you. You're going to make some mistakes, and some of them are going to be pretty bad. But don't give up on yourself, and realize that God forgives. Now, you may have some penalties, that you'll have consequences that you'll have to suffer along the way, but God will forgive. And when you fall down, then you get back up. If we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Christ cleanses us from all our sins. So when you fall down, what He's doing is He's inviting you, lending a hand. Hey, get back up. Let's keep going, because I'm going to cleanse that. I'm going to blot that out.
Yeah.
It's like the referee picking up a penalty flag.
Yeah.
That it's over. So hang on to your values. And then the last thing is I remember a youth director years ago that had a group of teenagers that he'd been on some kind of a trip with, and he took them to a mall. Now, can you imagine turning a bunch of kids loose in the mall?
No.
And so they gather around him as they're getting ready to all go their way. And he says, okay, I've got one rule for you. And he's held up his hand like that, and he says, it's be a Christian. That's it. So my advice, young people, all of the other stuff, be a Christian. And that'll lead the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, I know you're kind of tailoring your comments to my question, and you could add so much more wisdom for for generations. I mean, you got multiple generations, coming up behind you at this point. And I'm just so grateful for the example that you set for me and for so many others. I mean, I just talk with people all the time who say, well, Bill Long did this for me, and Bill Long did this for us as a couple. Bill Long did this for my children or for my grandchildren. And I'm so thankful. And I guess that's an encouragement that I'd like to go ahead and plug for younger generations, my generation, even older, is just to continue to have these types of conversations, because you draw out things that you never would have thought, solutions to problems, or even recognizing problems.
Yeah.
We often don't even recognize the problems that we're really facing. And it's not until somebody who's older can come along and say, you're addressing a symptom of a problem, not the real problem. And you've played that role in my life. So I guess a follow-up question to that about old generations teaching younger generations, what do you feel like we're missing right now? And this could be inside or outside the church. I mean, take it whatever direction you want.
It kind of fits both in and out. I see that while on the one hand we've had progress made with all the electronics and the media and the social media, all of that we've had, and when I go into a restaurant, sometimes I'll see 4 teenagers sitting at a table, and all 4 of them sitting there on the phone.
Yeah, right.
And I see that there are some schools, and I think maybe Cobb County is one of them, that now then they're making their students in middle school, and they're trying to move it to high school, put all their phones in a saving spot.
Yep.
And cannot have their phones in school. And that's because they've given most of their attention to their phone. And so what I'm saying is that this takes away, it's good to have the electronics. I'm not saying that's bad, it's good. But it takes away a community, a sense of being together. I know you may remember some of the old TV programs, Friends, that was built around those what was 4 or 6, I guess, and that they were a community that supported one another. Now, I think of Cheers,
right?
Where that these guys would come in there and they all had their seat, and they that's where they would go. They'd be recognized there, and it was home to them.
Yeah. And
that's there were other Golden Girls. I just think of different ones that came along. These are, I'm taking
this before my time.
You can still get the reruns, but and I think all those people who are in those are probably not even alive now. But the point is that we miss a lot of what it's like to be together.
Yeah,
have some people that you can count on. That's I want to be with some people that I can share with, that I can really spill my guts to, that I can really ask questions to.
Yeah.
And really, when you get separated from your group, it just a dying thing. I think about fire going and the charcoal, and you pull out one red hot coal and put it to the side, and you watch what happens.
Yeah.
And it dies when it gets to itself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way it is with us, that I think that you losing community is one of the worst things we can do. And there are actual studies that have been done about living in community, that is, living in such a place that you've got community to relate to, that they by test, they live longer, and that they're happier people. And so all I'm saying is that at church, that's the way it was in the beginning. Acts, the 2nd chapter, where the church began, they get together every day, it says, in Acts chapter 2, every day.
It's amazing.
And eat together.
Yeah.
And I can remember that when I was a kid, that you happen to be at somebody's house, it's close to dinner time, they'd want you to sit down and eat.
Yeah.
And that was true in the Bible times. That Acts chapter 2, or I think about one that's interesting is in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, that communion picture.
Yeah.
that the reason that they were together and the reason the whole discussion came up, and he introduces it by saying, you think you've come here to have the Lord's Supper, but you haven't really. You're missing the point, and your hearts are not right. Well, what was wrong was that their reason for coming together was there was a social meal. And if you read the text closely, you'll see that they took the bread, and then they had a meal, and then they took the cup. But this was a love feast, agape love feast, and that was where they related. Then it says that they were together every day, house to house, breaking bread together.
Yeah.
So that was the way it was then. And then in 1 Corinthians 14, where there's a whole section of scripture there talking about the relationships of the church and the strength of being one body. And there's 7 times in one chapter that it talks about encouraging one another. And when we go to church, our mindset has been prepped by being entertained so much, and we forget that the reason that we go to assembly to worship God is for the purpose of encouraging other people.
Yeah.
And that as I encourage somebody, that encourages me.
Yeah.
And that's a mutual encouragement. And you can worship anywhere, but for some reason, God wanted us to come together and worship some.
Yeah.
And that's what I call assembly worship. What that's for is so that we can have this time together. And as you go, then go expecting to encourage somebody.
Yeah.
Rather than, well, they didn't speak to me. No, how many people did I speak to? Or I just don't have anybody I can call on as a friend.
Yeah.
So I would really encourage that there be a whole lot more community opportunities for us as followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
And that, I think, will become very attractive
Yeah.
to those who are not followers.
Yeah. You talk about community, and I couldn't agree more with that we really are missing that. We're missing that in the secular world. We're just missing that in the church. And it's been one of the things that just quite frankly has been discouraging to me over the last couple of years in our church, as I just see that need, and I see people looking for that need, and yet they're just not quite finding it. And we have so many people who live, in multiple parts of town, and they live far apart, and so it's just been hard. Things that you used to do to be able to create community within the church are not as reliable as they once were. And yet I realized that so many people are waiting for the church to create community for them.
Yeah.
They're waiting for somebody to set up a group. They're waiting for somebody to do a class or something, and yet they can create that. You can create community. You just have to invite people into your home. You just have to get together people, and you have to really commit to doing that. And sometimes it seems like the effort is going to be, or the benefit's not going to be worth the effort, but it always is. And I don't know if you have anything to add to practically how to create
some
community.
of these places you see coffee shops, restaurants that basically are breakfast restaurants.
Yeah.
If you go there and watch, every single day you're going to see a group of men and probably groups of women, but you'll see a group of men that they get together, and they don't get together for any purpose other than just to talk to one another.
Yeah.
And they did that themselves. The restaurant, nobody set that up.
Yeah.
But that can happen within the church.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
or let me just change that to among Christians, among Christ followers.
That's a better distinction.
Yeah.
So, you have so much experience in leading in the church at large and leading other Jesus followers. Look back on your time, okay? And is there anything you wish you might have done differently?
Well, there are a lot of things, but when I think about my work, I preached my first sermon when I was 15 years old. And I was mentored by a fine older man and in his 30s. So I learned a lot, but much of what I learned and what I did in my early days was I would preach to try to win people to our church. And the way that generally was done, I can show you where that we have something that's more nearly right than what you have.
Yeah.
And so the focus was on church. And what you teach about that are peculiar or different about your church. And now, as I look back, while I'm sure that so many people who were led to the church were led also to Christ, but I look back and I think I wish that I had focused on Jesus and draw people to follow Jesus. There's a beautiful picture if you look at it over the whole realm of our history. God created man. He wanted relationship with man. That's why he created him. Man sinned, and so man then from thereafter has given that inclination for sin and commits sin. And so we find ourselves with a great gulf between us and God. And God did not create us to be that way. He created us to be with him. So he sent his son. He had sent prophets before, but he sent his son, and the son corrected the sin. He paid the penalty for the sin that every man had committed so that this gulf could be spanned and that he could bring man back to him. And that's the role of Jesus.
Yeah.
Therefore we talk about being a Jesus follower. So yes, I almost wish I could go back the numbers of places that I preached, held meetings, and come again. And like Paul, when he was teaching, he taught, the first thing he taught was about Jesus, being followers of Christ. And rather than being more devoted to what we've been, and this would be to anybody wherever he's going to church, or keeping the traditions of who we are, focus on who Jesus is and how do we become followers of Jesus in our church or wherever we are. So yes, as I look back, that's the one thing that I would change. My whole focus would be different. I remember one time I was out in a little country church holding a meeting. This when I was maybe 19 years old or 20. And the old gentleman that I was staying with saw me that day on the couch there, leafing through my Bible and my notes, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to figure out what to preach on tonight." He said, "Well, you can call it whatever you want to, but I know you're going to be preaching on baptism." And as I reflect on that, what that's saying is, I was elevating something that Jesus taught above Jesus.
Wow.
And that's what I would change.
Wow. That's amazing. I feel like we could spend a long time talking about that.
Yes.
Specifically. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. Well, as we kind of wrap up this part of the interview here, is there anything else you'd like to add? Just any other wisdom to share?
The thing that we live in a divided world, and we live in a secular world, actually, and people are struggling to have something to hang on to. And what I'm saying is that more and more, the people who really work it through are coming to say that hanging on to Jesus or God gives that to me, and then for me to progress in that, and it's going to be automatic almost that others are going to want that same path, and community is going to come. But this gives you value, it gives you a worldview, it gives you a sense of security for eternity. So I just believe that our world is more open for Jesus now than maybe what we think.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Bill, thank you so much. This is a great conversation, as it always is, and I just so appreciate, again, your example, appreciate your encouragement to focus on Jesus. I mean, especially for the church that we are a part of, we want to be the Jesus church, and we want to model him, reflect him, honor him, praise him, live in a way that's worthy of him and what he's called us to. And you've definitely led the way in that, and I thank you so much.
Well, I just say one more thing, that I remembered in a sermon that I preached several years ago in Dunwoody, I said, I wish that every church here would take the sign down and just put the name Jesus in front of it.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's awesome. And that's a great place to end. So thank you again.
I've enjoyed it.